Picture this. It's 1998, and a 60-year-old man walks into the Stardust Casino in Las Vegas with a simple key in his pocket. Within minutes, he'll trigger a jackpot worth thousands of dollars. The thing is, he didn't play a single spin. He didn't need luck. He didn't need strategy. Because Dennis Nikrasch wasn't a gambler. He was an artist, and his canvas was the most sophisticated slot machines in Nevada. What the casinos didn't know was that this wasn't his first heist. Over nearly a decade, this unassuming locksmith had quietly stolen somewhere between $16 and $40 million from Las Vegas casinos. He had perfected his method so well that he was essentially invisible. And the craziest part? He had already been caught once before for the exact same crime, served his time, and came back to do it all over again. Only this time, he was smarter, better, and nearly untouchable. Dennis didn't start as a criminal mastermind. He was a legitimate locksmith and TV repairman from Chicago who just understood how things worked mechanically. But in the early 1980s, Dennis discovered something that would change his life forever. Slot machines were basically just computers in fancy boxes, and computers could be reprogrammed. Back then, casinos believed their machines were tamper-proof fortresses, but Dennis saw vulnerabilities. He started experimenting with older mechanical slots, learning their patterns and secrets. In 1986, he was caught manipulating machines and sent to prison. But instead of breaking him, prison gave him time. Time to think, time to plan, and time to realize that the slot machines of the future would be even easier to crack because they'd be fully computerized. While other inmates counted down days, Dennis was counting possibilities. When he got out in the early 90s, the Las Vegas Strip had transformed. The old mechanical slots were gone, replaced by shiny computerized machines with EPROM chips. These were tiny computer chips that determined when a machine would pay out. To casino security, these chips were the ultimate safeguard. They were sealed inside locked cabinets, protected by cameras and guards, theoretically impossible to access. But Dennis looked at those locks and smiled. Because locks were his specialty, and now he had a plan that was absolutely brilliant in its simplicity. He would buy a slot machine legally and bring it to his garage. There, he would spend months reverse engineering the EPROM chip, learning its code, understanding how it decided when to pay jackpots. Then, and this is where it gets insane, he would reprogram chips to pay jackpots on demand. All he needed was a specific sequence of coins and button presses that he programmed himself as secret code that would force the machine to pay out its maximum jackpot instantly. But here's where Dennis showed he wasn't just smart, he was patient and methodical. He didn't rush into casinos alone. He assembled a team, carefully selecting people he could trust, including a former fellow inmate who became his right-hand man. They developed a system that was frighteningly efficient. Dennis would enter a casino during busy hours when security was distracted by crowds. He positioned himself at a pre-selected machine while a lookout kept watch. Then, with practiced precision, he'd use his locksmith tools to open the machinist's belly, a process that took him under 90 seconds. He'd swap the legitimate EPROM chip with his pre-programmed one, close everything up, and walk away. Minutes later, a member of his team would approach the machine, enter the specific sequence Dennis had programmed, and boom. Jackpot, thousands of dollars would pour out. The team member would collect, cash out, and disappear into the crowd. Later, Dennis would return during another distraction, swap the chips back to the original, and erase all evidence. The casino would review footage and see nothing but a lucky tourist hitting a legitimate jackpot. The beauty of Dennis's scheme was that it exploited human psychology as much as technology. Casinos expected cheaters to look nervous, to act suspiciously, to make mistakes. But Dennis looked like someone's grandfather. He dressed normally, acted casually, and understood that confidence was the best disguise. Security guards watched him open machines and assumed he was a technician because he moved with such authority. His team never celebrated at the machines, never drew attention, and never got greedy by hitting the same casino twice in short succession. They spread their hits across different properties, different times, different days. To any individual casino, These looked like isolated incidents of good luck. Nobody connected the dots because there were no dots to connect. Dennis had turned crime into a science, and for years, he was untouchable. The money poured in. Dennis and his crew hit jackpots ranging from $10,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars per machine. They targeted high-limit slots because bigger jackpots meant fewer trips and less exposure. Between 1993 and 1998, they executed countless successful hits across Las Vegas. Dennis lived well, but not lavishly. He understood that flashing wealth would raise questions. He was disciplined in ways most criminals never are. But every perfect system has a flaw, and Dennis's flaw was human nature. One of his team members started getting nervous about the risks. The more successful they became, the more paranoid this member grew about eventually getting caught. And when fear takes over, people make desperate decisions. In January 1998, that team member walked into the Nevada Gaming Control Board and confessed everything. The authorities were stunned. They had suspected something was wrong when statistical analysis showed impossible jackpot patterns, but they couldn't figure out the method. Now they knew. They set up one of the most elaborate sting operations in Las Vegas history. They let Dennis plan one more hit. They watched as he entered the Stardust Casino. They observed him approach a megabucks machine. They saw him open it with his tools, make the swap, and close it back up. The moment he finished, agents moved in and arrested him. When they searched his home, they found modified EPROM chips, detailed records, and enough evidence to prove he had orchestrated one of the most sophisticated casino heists ever conceived. Dennis Nikrasch, the man who had beaten Vegas at its own game for nearly a decade, was finally caught. Not because his system failed, but because he had trusted someone who couldn't handle the pressure. The trial became a sensation in Las Vegas. Dennis initially tried to fight the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. In 1999, he pleaded guilty to charges of racketeering and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 7 years in federal prison. Despite all the evidence and his confession, authorities could never determine exactly how much money Dennis had actually stolen. He had been so careful that many of his heists were never even reported as suspicious. Casinos had paid out those jackpots thinking they were legitimate. Some estimates put his total take at $16 million. Others suggest it could be as high as $40 million. The true number remains a mystery, a secret he took to his grave when he died in 2010. What's truly mind-blowing is the impact Dennis had on the entire casino industry. After his arrest, Las Vegas went into complete security overdrive. Casinos implemented tamper-evident seals on machines, chip verification systems, increased random internal audits, and created central databases that tracked unusual jackpot patterns across all properties. Security camera coverage became more comprehensive, focusing specifically on machine access points. Most importantly, they developed new encryption methods for the chips themselves, making them exponentially harder to reverse engineer. The industry poured millions into technology upgrades, all because one locksmith had exposed just how vulnerable their billion-dollar operations really were. Dennis Nikrasch had single-handedly forced Las Vegas to evolve. The legacy of Dennis Nikrasch remains controversial even today. Some see him as a criminal who stole millions through deception. Others view him almost as a folk hero, the little guy who outsmarted the massive corporate casinos at their own game. His story has been featured in documentaries, books, and countless articles about the greatest casino heists in history. But perhaps the most ironic part is this: he spent years perfecting a system, executed it flawlessly dozens of times, accumulated millions of dollars, and might have actually gotten away with it forever if he had worked alone. The machines didn't catch him. The cameras didn't catch him. The security guards didn't catch him. In the end, the weakness wasn't in his brilliant technical scheme, but in something far more human: trust. Sometimes the most sophisticated plan in the world can be undone by the simplest human emotion. Dennis Nikrasch proved you could beat the system, but he also proved that beating people is an entirely different game. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating heists and mysteries. We'll see you in the next one.